Welcome. So, today we're going to unpack a really sudden and kind of weird change on one of the biggest real estate websites in the world. Yeah, it's a change that has a lot of people talking. Okay, so let's just dive right into this mystery. Zillow, the site everyone uses, quietly removed its climate risk data right from the property listings. This was a feature specifically designed to help you, the homebuyer, make a smarter decision. And now, poof, it's gone. The big question on everyone's mind is simply why? And this wasn't some old, dusty tool that nobody used. Zillow just introduced this thing in the fall of 2024, and they were really proud of it, saying it was all about empowering buyers. So to just pull it a little over a year later, well, that's a pretty significant and, honestly, an abrupt reversal. To really get a handle on the impact here, we first have to rewind a bit and look at what this feature actually was. Why did Zillow think it was so important to build in the first place? And boom, here's your answer. I mean, look at that number. Zillow didn't just create this tool out of the blue. They launched it because their own research showed a massive majority of buyers, a full 80%, were already trying to figure out climate risk on their own. So Zillow was clearly just meeting a huge consumer demand. Now, to get this data, Zillow didn't just cook it up in their own offices. Nope, they partnered with a specialized firm called First Street. These guys are experts in climate data and risk modeling, and they were the ones providing all this information right there on every single listing. And the data wasn't just some vague warning either. It was super specific. For any house you looked at, you could see a score for 5 key risks: flood, wildfire, wind, heat, and even air quality. The whole point was to help you think about future costs and what you're really getting into long term. Okay, so if this data was so in demand by pretty much everyone looking for a house, why on earth did it just disappear? Well, the answer seems to be a classic conflict between giving people information and, actually closing a deal. And the pressure came from a couple of really powerful groups. So on one side, you had a major MLS, that's the big database realtors use, and they started raising some serious questions about how accurate the data really was. And then on the other side, you had real estate agents themselves who are apparently complaining that these scary-looking risk scores were making it harder to sell homes. All right, so how did Zillow officially explain this whole thing? Their statement is, let's say, very carefully worded, but it gives us a pretty good peek into their rationale and what the new experience is actually like for someone trying to buy a house. So in their official response, notice they didn't say a word about hurting sales. Instead, it was all about adhering to MLS requirements and creating a consistent experience, which, is pretty much corporate speak for we had to play by the rules that the listing services set for us. And here's the crucial point. The information isn't totally gone. But, and this is a big but, it's no longer part of the page. What used to be front and center now requires an extra click, an extra step that literally takes you off Zillow to a whole other website. And we all know that extra click, that extra friction, makes a huge difference. Now, if this whole situation is giving you a little bit of déjà vu, it should. Believe it or not, this isn't the first time big real estate websites have struggled with a controversial piece of data and ultimately decided to just pull it from their listings. Just think back to 2021. Several of the big players, including Redfin, and even a site owned by Zillow, got rid of crime data maps. The reason back then was a concern that the data could be used in ways that actually reinforced racial bias in housing. So there's a clear precedent here for removing data that's seen as a problem for the transaction. But here's what makes Zillow's move so interesting right now. It actually puts them out of step with their biggest competitors. As of today, both Redfin and Realtor.com are still showing that exact same First Street climate data right there on their listings. So, for the moment, Zillow is the odd one out. When you strip everything else away, this whole situation really boils down to one fundamental conflict. And it's a conflict that sits right at the heart of the entire modern real estate market. It really is this incredibly difficult balancing act, right? On one hand, the dream is to empower you, the buyer, with every single piece of data possible. But on the other hand, what happens when that very same data, even if it's 100% accurate, makes a house harder to sell? It's a tension that could really define the future of real estate tech. Are we going to lean towards more data or less? So, the big question this whole thing leaves us with is this. In an age of endless data, who actually gets to be the gatekeeper? Who decides what information is helpful versus what might be harmful to a sale, especially when we're talking about what is probably the biggest financial decision of a person's life?